like you don't know me now.
Definitely come check out the main game hall. We have our Stern Marco Pinball Pirate booth set up over there. We have the Insider Connected Leaderboard Challenge going. So everyone that's on the top 3 of that leaderboard is going to win a really cool Stern prize by 6 p.m. on Sunday. So come out and play with us.
All right, we're live.
We're live. All right, everybody, welcome to California Extreme. Today we have Mike Vinikour, Associate Game Developer with Stern, and he's going to walk us through his epic career in gaming. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, everybody. Is this too loud, Scott, or can you guys hear me okay?
Sounds good out here, right?
Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So when Ken Chaney asked me to do a panel for the 3rd year in a row, I'm like, well, man, I might be out of material, because last year I did the James Bond one, and then the year before I did one with Randy Martinez. And he's like, you want to do another one with Randy? I'm like, I didn't work on John Wick, so I can't, you know? It's like one of the only 2 games I didn't work on at Stern. But then I reminded myself that in April of this year was my 30th anniversary of working in the game business. And I've got a fairly interesting tale to spin of all the places I've worked, at least that's what people tell me. So when I pitched Ken, like, why don't I just go over my whole career? And he's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So long and twisting road took me to pinball, 20 something years later. So originally I wasn't gonna have a presentation, but then I got inspired last weekend when I watched some of my colleagues have them, so I'm like, I'll throw something together. So feel free to raise your hand and ask questions throughout the whole thing. We'll keep it interactive. And there's a couple trivia questions in there, you can win prizes. And if you ask a particularly good question, I'll give you a prize too. So, so here we go. Yeah, the transition is slow.
That's great.
So when we do these, when we do like our Stern, like State of the Union company-wide meetings, Dave Peterson always has these crazy transitions. So I'm like, I gotta be like Dave and do that. So there you go. So as soon as I could reach the flipper buttons when I was a kid in the 70s, my dad started taking me to an arcade called Just Games. The photo here is not the one. They had 11 stores at their peak, all around the Chicagoland area. Mine was in Downers Grove. It was at the end of my street, so it was just a short walk or a bike ride away. It was like maybe a block and a half away. My dad used to like to play pinball, so he took me to play with him. And this was before there were video games, so I was really fascinated and I fell in love with that. But then when he moved, then when the video games started trickling in, like the tail end of the 70s, then I was obsessed with those just as much, if not more. So I had the good fortune that in the lower right corner, that's my cousin Joe. When I was in middle school, like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, he was the manager of the Just Games at the end of my street. So I just stopped going home, and I would go there every day after school and all day on Saturday to work. After school, I'd get like a couple hours with him every day before his shift ended, and then I'd sit there with him for his whole shift on Saturdays, and he'd like sit in the back and read the paper, and he'd let me clean the games and give out the change, and he just gave me an endless supply of free tokens. So I got really good at like everything in that arcade. And I was completely obsessed with the games. Like I couldn't get enough of them. When we go on family vacations, I'm like, all I cared about was like, where's the local arcade? Since we're in Northern California, you guys are all familiar with like the Carmel, there's that whole 17-mile drive. So when I was like 13, my dad and I came out here to California for a family vacation. And one of the days he drove us out there to see this thing. And so we're done with this thing. He goes, what did you think, son? I'm like, you drove me 2.5 hours to get here just to drive another 17 miles? Like, where's the arcade? So, and he told like the mayor of that town because he knew him, and that guy was really offended. But I'm like, I didn't care. Now I would like it, but back then all I cared about was video games. So I never really thought about a job, but this place was also a test site. Like Williams tested games there, Gottlieb tested games there, and Warren, I'm gonna put you on the spot in a minute because I always forget this woman's name. So I played out every game in there and I mastered them all. And one Saturday afternoon, this woman from Gottlieb, and Warren, would you know who she was?
It could have been a bunch of different people, I'm not sure.
Yeah, she came in to check, like, she was asking my cousin all these questions, like, about the games that they had on test. And it was like, Argus was there, Tiles, and there was a couple others. And my cousin's like, I don't play any of this stuff. Ask my cousin. He's the best at all of these games, and he plays them constantly. So she's asking me all these questions, and in the middle of like my 10th answer, she goes, you know, when you get a little older, you should work in the game business. Like, I think you'd be really good at it. Like, you know a lot about this stuff. And I'm looking at her with like this blank stare, like, but work is what my parents do. I just want to hang out here all day. Like, you know, like, I just want to play video games at the arcade. But little did I know, like, she predicted my future, and I didn't plan for any of it. All right, so fast forward to, you know, Mortal Kombat 1. I was in a relationship with a woman I thought I was going to marry. She was finishing up college or in the middle of it, so I had a lot of free time when she was at school, and I still used to go to Just Games all the time, even though my cousin was no longer there. I'd still stop by there and play games a couple times a week. One day I'm watching a friend of mine play Mortal Kombat. I didn't pay any attention to it when it first came out, but I saw him do Sub-Zero's Fatality. I'm like, I didn't know anything like that was in the game. I'm like, oh, I want to do that. So and I had to figure out how to play it, and I just became obsessed with it. And then when Mortal Kombat 2 came out, I was even more obsessed with that. And then I started working at Just Games. So I'd stay after hours to practice, and I was like one of the best players of that game, like on all of Chicagoland, which then led to this fateful meeting at a punk rock concert. So I had no plan what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't, even though the woman at Gottlieb was like, yeah, you should work in the game industry. Like now I'm 24 years old, I still don't know what I want to do. I'm living at home still. And work was just a means to buy more records because I'm an obsessive record collector. Like I didn't really have, I'm like, I'm gonna stay living at home forever if I can because it's free. And so I'm at a punk rock show, this band, the Boll Weevils. They're great friends of mine. They're a Chicago punk rock band. I go walk to the bar and I see this tall, skinny guy wearing a Mortal Kombat t-shirt. And back then you couldn't buy those shirts anywhere. Like they didn't sell merch like they do now. So even though I'm a super shy guy, I don't talk to anybody I know, I ran right up to this guy. And I'm like, I like your shirt, where did you get it? Like, I want it. And he's like, well, I work for Midway Games. I'm like, get out of here, you do not. I'm trying not to swear. Yeah. So, it's a little bit more vulgar. And he goes, no, look, and he pulls out his business card. His name was Bill Davelstein. That's him and me on the right. I don't know where I got the balls to say this, but I'm like, look, I'm one of the best Mortal Kombat 2 players probably on earth, and I would really love to be a game tester for you guys, but I don't know, like, if you need that or like how I would go about such a thing. I'm like, I go ask the bartender for a pen and a paper, and I give him my number, and I said, all right, thanks, here you go. And then I turned around and got my beer and left, and I'm like, he's just gonna throw that number in the trash. He was just being polite. A month later, my phone rang, and it was Bill. And he goes, are you still interested in testing games for us? We're ready. I'm like, yeah. Like, I didn't think you were actually gonna call, but I'm like, just tell me when and where and what time. He goes, all right, bring 2 friends. And then he gave me the address and the time. And first game, so the first day we go, the picture on the left is the Williams building. At the time I started, we were all in that building, video and pinball. That picture is a little bit more current. It was after they remodeled it when they got out of the coin-op business and they were just doing slots. The building on the right was the Midway Games building that video moved into, which was right across the street. And that happened during Mortal Kombat 3. So the first game I worked on, and now another throwback to Warren since he's sitting there, he worked on this as well, was Revolution X. It was a 3-man gun game, and it featured the band Aerosmith. And it featured some really great digitized graphics. It had this cool 3D effects that we'd never seen before. Warren was very much responsible for the whole digitizing system and all that cool stuff, the 3D stuff, all from him. So myself and the 2 people I brought, which was my girlfriend at that time and my friend Jason, we tested this game, and at the end of the day, they're like, all right, we'll call you back when we're ready for some more testing. And then they called me, probably a few days later, and they're like, hey, we're ready for you to come back. Don't bring your girlfriend, because she didn't seem that into it. You can bring the other guy, though. And we've got a 3rd guy. So the 3rd guy was Eddie Ferrier. He tested Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. He was just a kid that they found at the arcade. He was the Rain Man of video games. He was ridiculously good at them. He would learn them in seconds. And then he'd figure out how to exploit them just as fast. Like, I could almost never beat him in a game of Mortal Kombat. We were like the 2 best people I knew. So that's where he and I met. And when we used to take breaks working on Revolution X, we'd play Mortal Kombat 2 in the hallway. And we would draw a crowd of all the other developers because they were like, wow, we've never seen people play like this, you know? And one by one, they're like, would you work on our game when it's ready? And we're like, yeah, you know, now at this point, I'm like, this is what I want to do. This was my calling. And ultimately, like, I wanted to work on Mortal Kombat, which is why I was there. And then that leads to the real reason why I wanted to work there, which is Mortal Kombat. So Eddie and I were both contractors. My friend Jason, like after RevX, he never came back because it was just, they only needed 2 people, and Eddie and I were like the ones that got all the attention. We were the better players. So, and Eddie already had a relationship with Ed and John, having worked on the first 2. So he's like, yeah, bring Mike in, and then, you know, he and I want to do this. So I started working on MK3, which is like, I couldn't believe like they're gonna pay me to play Mortal Kombat. And when you're at least back then, like we didn't just play the games and look for bugs. Like they always credited us as like tester/analyst, because they would ask us like if we liked the game, what was fun about it, what wasn't fun about it, and they were really open to taking suggestions about what we could think they could improve with the gameplay. And Ed Boon was especially receptive to that when it came to like how the moves worked in the game and like how much damage it should do, how fast or slow they were. Like the 3 of us, Ed, Eddie, and myself, spent a ton of time, like a lot of late nights playing the game. We would just take turns playing each other and then make constant notes of like what was broken, what was too strong, what wasn't strong enough. I distinctly remember there's a character called Nightwolf. He had this dash move and it never knocked you down the whole time we're developing it. And every day, the first thing on my list I gave Ed was Nightwolf's dash should knock you down. And I did that for months until I finally got my way and he made it. I'm like, it took me like pinning him in the corner and just doing it repeatedly to say like, this is why it needs to knock you down. He goes, all right, you win. And then he put it in. But so the 3 of us, the 2 of us worked on that. And then from that point forward, anytime there was a game ready, they would call us and like, all right, come work on this game. And I wanted this to be a career. Like Eddie was considerably younger than me and still lived at home. I lived on my own at this point. And I'm like, well, I got a roof, you know, over my head. I need to have health insurance. Like I have to be a grown up now. So I was lobbying for them to hire us full time, and it took a while. But eventually it happened thanks to a little bit of help from Sal DeVito pushing management to say, look, they're going to leave if you don't hire them full time. And they didn't want to lose us. So, and I don't know how I had the balls again to like lobby for them to hire us as a tag team, but it worked. So I got Eddie a full-time job too. I worked on a ton of games. Eddie and I both together, we worked on everything. So this was just a sample of all the stuff that I worked on. But my memory is a little fuzzy and there's a lot of projects back then. I did other stuff at the company beyond this in a different capacity, which I'll get to shortly. But this was like a pretty big sampling. It was all arcade games except for we did 2 console things. Mortal Kombat Trilogy was just for the PlayStation. And it was like MK3 on steroids, and it had like all the characters from MK2 added to it. And I wish we would have made it an arcade game. It was actually really cool. And then Mortal Kombat Mythologies was like a platformer starring Sub-Zero. And that game had really great graphics, but the gameplay wasn't that great. Like it was really, the controls were very cumbersome, and that was like the biggest strike against it in the fans' eyes. All right, trivia question. So at Midway, you know, we had some like certain games we had hidden characters that would put people's faces on them. All the design teams and people that worked there, including myself. So can anybody tell me what the first game I was a hidden character in? No one?
Hint, please.
All right.
Oh, wait.
I'll take 3 guesses. I'll take 1 guess each person. I'll try 3 different people. You go first.
All right, I'm gonna guess Mortal Kombat 3.
No. No. No, man, I wish I was. All right, TJ.
NBA Hang Time?
You're close. I'll take 1 more. Oh, the hint is it's a little earlier. Warren, I don't know if you can qualify for the prize. I would just give you the prize. I don't know. Anybody else? Yes. All right.
Get that kind of prize. You can have a banner.
Yay, everybody clap.
All right, okay, so the answer, let's just go on slide, it was Open Ice, and there's a screen cap of it.
Do you have to put in like a secret?
Yeah, so if you put in MXV in my birthday, which is October 14th, you would get, I think, Warren, you're probably in NBA Jam.
I'm an NBA.
You're in NBA Jam. You were already gone, I think, by the time, you were at the beginning of Open Ice, you were still around, I think.
Yeah.
What initials did we put in for NBA Jam to play you?
WBD 817.
UBD 817. Okay.
August 17.
So, okay, moving along. So then, after I got burned out on game testing, because as much as you think it's great to like play video games all day and get paid for it, when you have to play a game like Cruising the World, and this is not to take away from that game, it was a great game, but when you worked on that game for like 7 months and all you had to do is play it all day long over and over and over again, like you get a little burned out. And I had aspirations like I wanted to do other stuff. At some point I wanted to become a designer. So thankfully I was able to change positions and I became the field test manager. So we used to place games on locations, and then months before they came out, we don't do that stuff now because there's this thing called the internet and there's smartphones, and you can't hide stuff anywhere anymore. So we would have a handful of locations in our area, arcades and some bars and bowling alleys and hotel game rooms that we would test games at. At the bottom here is a sampling. Dennis's Place for Games, which is one of my favorite. I love Dennis. Sadly, he passed away a handful of years ago. He was one of our main places. Diversions on the bottom right was in the middle, some tokens from Galaxy World. There was 2 of them, and they were huge. They were like some of the earliest like FECs in the Chicago area. Just massive, hundreds of games. Friar Tuck's was a place way out in Calumet City that had been around forever. They were most famous for, I believe, somebody had a heart attack there playing Berserk and died. It was like a kid. He had a heart attack in the middle of a game of Berserk. I found the article, but I didn't want to add it in there. But I didn't know that when I worked there. I only recently, someone's like, hey, do you remember like that's where this kid had a heart attack? I had no idea. So, so I used to put the games on location. We'd update them constantly because the games were still in development at the time. I'd track the earnings. They would send me the earnings reports. I had to do a report for the whole company and all of upper management every week. I'd have to go update the games, fix them when they'd break, go get audits from them. So I drove around a ton. I was really in the office, and man, I killed a car fast by racking up all those miles, because you'd go like from Calumet City is like practically Indiana, and then I'd go like way out northwest, which I'm almost in Wisconsin for a couple of these things. Most of them were in the near suburbs or in the city proper, but there was a bunch of outliers that were just like insanely far. So I just picked 3 days a week that I would just go and I'd split them up by territory. So I did that until the end of, so in 1999, they closed CoinOp, and then sadly in May of 2001, I believe it was, Midway got out of the coin-operated game business, and so now Williams only did slot machines at that point, and Midway Games tried to transition into the home market. And then, if I could wear my glasses to read this because I'm old. So in 2001, they got out of CoinOp. In 2009, Midway filed for bankruptcy, and then they were completely gone, and all the IPs went up for auction. Like Warner Brothers got Mortal Kombat. I think THQ got a lot of the other stuff, like all the sports titles, and then they went bankrupt, and I don't know who owns that stuff now. But I was at that company for 7 years and change. I really believed like I'm gonna work here for the rest of my life. That was the goal, because at the time they were the industry leader, and then slowly but surely you could see the decline of the arcade market when console games got better. And I'm like, the writing was on the wall, and I was trying to transition over to the home side. I was promised a position that never panned out as a producer. So then when they closed the doors in CoinOp, my world was shattered, and I was looking for a job. And at this point, like, I wanted to do game design, and obviously CoinOp wasn't a thing, wasn't really much of a thing anymore. Raw Thrills had started, I talked to those guys about a gig, but my assistant in the field test program and I both interviewed for the same job, and he came in cheaper, so they hired him. I can't be mad about it, he's a great friend of mine, but that led me to accomplish one of my goals, which was to become a video game designer. Studio Gigante was started by some guys that worked at Midway, and they left before CoinOp went away. John Tobias was the president, Mark Panacho, Dave Mikicic, and a few other people that left Midway all at the same time, started the studio. When they found out that what happened at CoinOp, that I lost my job, Mark Panacho called me up. He goes, hey, I'm not saying we have a job for you, but we're working on a deal with Microsoft right now, and if we get it, we'll have a job for you. And he goes, but that's all I can do. Like, I'm like, hey, I got severance pay and I got unemployment. Like, I'm good. I can wait it out, you know? So he gave me like weekly updates, you know, like we have meetings, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually they got the deal, and it was to do this fighting game, Tao Fen, what you see in the center there. That was a 3D fighter, and then they hired me to be like the junior game designer. And they told me, like, we don't know if you'll be any good at this design thing, but it's worth rolling the dice, because the worst case scenario, you'll be our game tester when the game gets that far if you suck at being a designer. Thankfully that never happened, and I was actually able to hire Eddie to contract for us to do game testing for us at one point. And then I hired my friend Matt C., who was my assistant in the field test program. When Midway closed, he went to go work for that Friar Tuck's arcade, and he hated the commute, and, you know, and the business was dying. So I rescued him from there and hired him to be our game tester full time. So we did that game. It came out to mixed reviews. There was the problem of, not to knock on artists, but when I worked with these guys at 2 different studios, like the company was run by artists, and the gameplay always took a back seat. But the art and the animations looked fantastic, but like there wasn't as much time spent and resources spent to really perfect the gameplay. And because I was the junior guy, my say only went so far. So the games looked fantastic, but they could have been better in the gameplay. WrestleMania 21 had, at the time, like the best animation like in any wrestling game, and I got to direct. I was a huge wrestling fan. I got to direct all the motion capture. We worked with WWE guys, and we would fly out to California once a week near Los Angeles to a place called House of Moves. It was in a motion capture studio, and we had a wrestling ring set up, and we would film them. You know, we'd capture all the moves, and I'd have a list of like, here's all the stuff I need, and here's all like I need reversals to all this stuff, and all those WWE guys that we worked with were in their development system at the time, and every single one of them that we ever worked with got called up to TV within the next 2 years and became various levels of big stars. One of which, he and I are still great friends to this day, and like 8 years later, he broke me into the wrestling business, which I worked part-time as a photographer, and then like a booker, promoter, and a writer. So I got to live another dream based off of my video game thing that led to that. When WrestleMania 21 came out, like the project was managed very poorly, and we were really late. And we were supposed to do a sequel, and then the publisher was THQ. They dropped us for the sequel probably about a month before we were done, maybe 2 months before we were finished with this one. And when we were finishing up that game, we were like pitching concepts to other publishers to try to find a new publishing deal for a new game. And then when we turned in the master for WrestleMania 21, in the first and only that I know of screw up in the whole industry, THQ sent to production an old build of the game that was at least, from our guess, 6 weeks older than the final. So it barely worked, like it crashed all the time. The online component didn't work. And then the game came out. We didn't know this happened until after the game went into stores and people were playing it, and the reviewers were writing about it. And we're like, wait, what happened? And then the truth came out. They're like, oh, we sent the wrong master. And all the studios that were like courting us at that time to pick us up to do a project all backed off after that because we got blamed for it, even though it wasn't our fault. Like, we turned in the right thing, and somebody at that publisher like handed over the wrong disc. I don't even know why they would have something that old. So sadly, that was the end of Studio Gante, and I was looking for a job again. After about a year and a half of lean living and I refused to move. I'm very attached to where I live, so I wasn't going to move out of state, which really limited my options in Chicago where I could work. Eventually, I got a job after a false start. High Voltage Software gave me a game design gig, and they had interviewed me a year prior, and then they fell on some hard times briefly, and so they just ghosted me for like a year, and I'm like, I don't know what I did wrong. And it turned out like they lost a bunch of money, and a couple things got canceled, so they had to like put the brakes on hiring anybody. And then when they recovered, then they reached back out and they re-interviewed me, and it led to a job there. The first project I worked on was Ghost Recon 2. It was for the PSP. I had never played the console versions, but it was actually pretty fun. And unlike my previous game design gig, like they had these visual tools, and they were using like the Unreal Engine and I learned a lot from this place. But it was also like, I liked it like a video game factory. Like, you didn't get to choose what you worked on. They would just assign you the stuff, and then they would move you around in different rooms depending on what team you were on. So it was like, it felt like very much like an assembly line. I liked the Ghost Recon game a lot. Then I did a little bit of help on this Harvey Birdman game, which was kind of like that, there was a lawyer game that Capcom made.
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about?
yes, Ace.
Ace something, right?
Yeah.
I want to say Ace Ventura, but that's like the the
Yeah.
Phoenix,
Yeah.
something Phoenix.
Ace, Phoenix,
Attorney, yeah.
Attorney.
It was a similar game to that.
Yeah.
So I worked on those two games, and then they had this fire department hired them to do like a simulator, a video game simulator of like, it was like training software. So I worked on that for a little while. And then I was working on this game about Heroes, the TV show at the time. And that was in the very early stages, and I was like, I got put on that project, I was writing up ideas, and the guy that was in charge, he was very standoffish, he goes, yeah, this doesn't work for me, try again. I'm like, well, tell me what doesn't work, so give me some direction, you're the lead. And he's like, I don't know, just not this. So, at the same time that was happening, like, I was like, all right, you know, I'm done here. And some of the guys that were at Studio Gigante decided they were gonna try again and start a studio after EA closed, where they all went after Gigante. So they started up this company called Robomoto, and they reached out to me while I was still an employee at High Voltage. Were like, hey, you know, Activision's entertaining, hiring us to do either Rock Band or Tony Hawk. Would you be interested in working with us? And can you help us come up with some ideas to pitch to them? I'm like, yeah, because I was the only one they knew that knew anything about skateboarding, and I was like crazy record collector, music aficionado, concert photographer, so they're like, all right, well, he knows a ton about music too, like, this will help us get the gig. So, so I met with those guys, like, on my, like, call in sick and like go help them, or on my days off, I'd go meet with them. And then I met with the Activision guys with them, and they gave us the gig, and they like told us to do that, okay, we'll give you Tony Hawk. So those guys hired me right after that, and I put in, you know, I left High Voltage. The game we did was Tony Hawk Ride. As soon as I started there, like, this was I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to say this the most diplomatic way possible, but this was the job that soured me on working in video games for the rest of my life. Like, it was a horrible experience, and those guys, you know, like, I thought we were friends, and then like really threw me under the bus. It was clear to me from day one that like they only hired me out of a sense of obligation because they just really wanted to use me to get the deal. And they're like, well, now we gotta hire him because we got it, you know? And so I was set up to fail from the beginning. I'm like, well, what should I work on? They're like, I'm gonna go fight for something. I'm like, what kind of leaders are you that you're telling me to go find something to work on? Like, you all hired me, like, I'm not the lead. So eventually they're like, you can do the cameras because nobody else wants to do it. And I had nothing to do with the gameplay, and I'm not just saying that because the game turned out poor, but it really did, like, they wouldn't listen to me. So I did the camera, I scripted all the camera stuff for it, and that was the only thing I worked on. This game had a skateboard controller because Rock Band was hot at the time, so every company wanted to sell you peripherals, you know, like, oh, we can sell them all these plastic toys to be controllers, let's do it with a skateboard. They were given the Tony Hawk engine to work with from Neversoft, which is like 10 years in, right? And the guy that was in charge, like the tech guy, it was also the lead programmer, he got really frustrated one day when he couldn't get an answer about something he didn't understand fast enough. So he's like, screwed, I'm running my own engine, which set us back like months. So it was just a disaster from start to finish, and it was late, and you know, they just made everybody work there, totally burned out everybody. So when we finished that game, like, they just got rid of me and everybody else that spoke up about the poor working conditions. They went on to do a sequel to it that did even worse, and then they went out of business. And the in-betweens, in between a bunch of these gigs, I did contract work for Ralph Mills on a couple different occasions. They were fantastic people. We had a nice history working together at Midway, started by Eugene Jarvis. They're the most successful coin-op company in the world now. Every time I needed work and health insurance and I was having trouble, those guys gave me work with health insurance. I'll be forever grateful for them. And then I ended up working in play mechanics for 3 years before I got my dream of going to pinball, which after the Robomoto experience, I'm like, I'm gonna stay in games, it's gotta be pinball, because I'm sick of video games, and this console game design thing, it's a grind, you know, it's a young man's game, or young woman's game. Like, if you have a family or anything and you want to value your free time, it's not the best business to get into because you're working all the time. So, so after playing mechanics, I'm like, man, that one again was a job it was really close to home, and it gave me insurance and an income when I really needed it, and I'll always be grateful for it. But doing tech support for Buck Hunter wasn't like my ideal situation. I didn't even really like the game. Yeah, that was like, I had to answer the phone and I was watching Netflix all day when there was no calls. So it was an easy gig, but you know, I wanted to do more. I really wanted to be in pinball. So eventually that led to a phone call from Keith Johnson, and he's like, hey, you want to come work at Jersey Jack? I'm like, yeah, I want to work in pinball. I want to get out of here at play mechanics, because you know wasn't my ideal job. I wanted to be in pinball. So they hired me to like build whitewoods and do all the cable design for their games. When I started, I just see that title. I have to go back and edit it. So how embarrassing. So I started Hobbit had just started shipping, and there was a bunch of cleanup work and stuff that didn't really work right that we had to fix, and then ship out stuff to customers that already got their games, and then moving forward they would running change to fix them in production. I did all the cable layouts and the light work for the cable work for the WAS 2.0 light system when they replaced all the boards. I had to redesign how it was all wired, and then I did built all the whitewoods and prototypes and did all the cable design dialed in. And at that point, my real dream of where I really wanted to be came true. So when Midway closed, I really wanted to go work at Stern, but there wasn't a place for me there. And then every time I would lose a job or leave a job, from that point forward, Lyman Sheets would always go to George Gomez or whoever was in charge. There was times when George wasn't even in charge, and he'd just go to Gary. And he's like, I want to hire Mike. I want him to work on games with me. I think he'd be a great fit here. He tried to get me in the lab when Ray Chancellor was running it, and nothing ever panned out. It wasn't that anybody didn't like me. I knew at least a small percentage at the time of people that worked there. Lyman was there, Pat Lawler came and went, Steve Ritchie came and went. Keith Johnson worked there, Dwight worked there at some point. Those guys all came and went at different times. So I had friends there, but the timing just wasn't there. But he never stopped trying. In fact, at one point, Lyman went to George Gomez and goes, look, I want him to work on games with me. I'll teach him how to do display effects, even though he's not a programmer, just so he can work on games with me and we can give him a job. And George was like, as much as I like Mike, if I'm gonna hire somebody to do programming, I want a programmer for that, so they can do other games and not just do that. But when he goes, when the time is right, we'd love to have him. And then eventually, 7.5 years ago now, Lyman got his wish. His persistence, and I got mine, so his persistence paid off. I started right as Batman started shipping, so which was the first Spike 2 game, and the first project I worked on was Batman. Lyman and I worked on that game for, close to 2 years before we got the software done. I helped them, they hired me as a software tester, but when George was he came and pursued me at this time. He's like, what will it take to come get you to work here? I'm like, well, call me. That's really a phone call, and tell me what you want me to do. So, after working out with George, I told him look, I'll do whatever you guys want. If you want me to do the software tester, that's fine. But eventually, I want to design a game for you guys, and I would like to, do more than just that. And George said, I'll encourage you to find your path here, and I'll help you do that. He goes, when you get here, just find your way, and then if you're good at it, I'll keep you going, and if you're not, I'll redirect you. So I would start, offering my suggestion on rules on various games, and depending on the lead, it either it was either welcomed or met with some resistance or apprehension. Eventually, I wore them all down just through getting to know them, and then more and more they became more receptive to asking for hearing my ideas or even asking for them. So, but Lyman was the first one because he had a lot to do on Batman, and then I helped pitch a bunch of ideas, and he used a handful of them, including you guys familiar with the channel changing feature in Batman, where you've got the multiple TVs on the screen and you can change what's on the TV? I invented that. like that. I pitched it to Lyman, because he just had the TVs, and he's like, whatever the last thing you started goes in the big screen and everything else moves in small. And I'm like, well, man, it would be cool if I could choose with, like, you know, I change the channel with a button. I'm like, you couldn't do that, could you? And he thought about it. He goes, I think I can. He goes, come by my office in the morning tomorrow, and I'll show you where I'm at. I'm gonna work on it now. The next day, he had it done. Like, he couldn't wait. Like, I walked in there, he heard me go in my office because it was just 2 doors down. And he comes running in my office. He goes, come here, I'm gonna show you this. And he showed it, and he had totally finished it. He goes, what do you think? I'm like, he goes, this was just my first pass. I'm like, oh no, you're done. Like, it's perfect. You don't need to change anything. The only thing we tweaked was how long you held the button in. And I told him on like the magic numbers of a third of a second for the long press. And that's the only thing he changed from what he originally coded up. So I worked on Batman, I worked on Aerosmith, and then that led to, in some way, shape, or form, I've worked on every single game that Stern has done in the last 7.5+ years. And I say plus because when we did software updates to Spike 1 games, like Kiss, Ghostbusters, Game of Thrones, I got to help contribute to like redesigning some of the rules to those games when we updated them. Especially Kiss, that one I'm particularly proud of because I really liked that game before. And then I'm really proud of it now because I think we took a good game and made it great. So depending on the game, I either did software testing in addition to contributing rules. Sometimes I didn't contribute any rules. It really depended on the team. I helped out wherever they needed it. Games that I worked on with Lonnie, like Aerosmith, Guardians, Stranger Things, Bond, Kiss, like he and I collaborated on rules for all of those things once we started working together more often. Lyman's games, I pitched stuff, and if he liked it, he would use it. Keith Elwin didn't really need my help, but he made the MXV skill shot a thing. When I pitched him an idea for a skill shot, he goes, well, let's name it after you. And that became like now, like there's a whole handful of games that do it. So this is most of the games. I worked on every single Spike 2 game, and my streak got broken by Jaws and then re-broken by John Wick. Those are the only 2 that I didn't touch in any way. Like some games, like a bunch of them I designed the achievements for Insider Connected. The rock music pins that have expression lights, I designed all those light shows. So really, I wear a lot of hats at Stern, and they send me all these shows too. So that I believe. Here's the full game list right now. I counted it the other day, and I forget, but it's somewhere around 30 games I've worked on in 7.5 years, which is crazy because it's like, I think it's like 3 times greater than the same amount of time I worked at Williams Bally Midway.
And worked on all these games and go to shows.
And
at least
I'm
once
on
a
tour
month.
with Moto and all the Marco folks, like a third of the year I'm on tour, so they have to work around me being gone. All right, here's another trivia question you can win a prize. What was the first Stern Pinball machine to have the MXV Super Skill Shot?
Stranger Things?
No, but I'll give you a consolation.
Oh yeah.
Because he said Stranger Things again. All right, so it's not Stranger Things. Anything else? Anyone else? I think you know this, TJ, but I'll go to you if nobody else gets it. All right, going once. You know what? I'll go back and show you guys the list of games. All right, I'll give you a hint. It's on this page. Yes. No. Dwight will not give me an MXV skill shot. And in fact, I think he goes out of his way to think of all the good skill shots on his playfields before I ever get to see them. Because he's like, oh, I'll put one in if you get one that I don't think of first. I'm like, you don't even let me see the game until you've designed all the skill shots. Anybody else?
Led Zeppelin?
No, there's not one there.
Guardians of the Galaxy?
No. All right, TJ, you can answer it.
Iron Maiden?
Yes. First one was Iron Maiden. So this company there was, I was testing Iron Maiden. I was working out with Keith, and I tried to do the skill shot where you plunge the upper flipper and you hit the super jackpot. I missed, and I did the little loop, and then I hit the super jackpot. So I would go running into Keith's office. I'm like, you should make this a skill shot. I just did it. And I told him what it was. He goes, oh, that's good. He goes, well, why don't we name it after you? I'm like, what do you mean? I thought it was ribbing me. I'm like, there's no way this is true. He goes, we'll call it the MXV Super Skill Shot, and we'll name it after you, and it will become a thing. I'll let you have one in every game that I do. Now I didn't know that had a limit of 2 games, because because, so we did it, and then people really liked it, and then I designed one in Jurassic Park, and then people really liked that, and then I get to do one in Deadpool, I get to do one in Stranger Things, I did one in James Bond. I pitched one for Godzilla, and I don't know if it'll ever make it in, but they did like it, but it's not up to me. So Keith was right, it became a thing, and a lot of people are like, I love your skill shots, and I'm just like, I can't believe that there's even a skill shot named after me, but I'm glad that people like them. All right, so now that's 7.5 years in, and now we're at 30 plus now, because I'm a few months in. And I know I said this when I worked at Midway, but man, I hope to work at Stern for the rest of my life, or as long as they'll have me. It's really a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to, I work with so many talented people, and I'm just one small piece of helping make fun. And I'm very grateful that they have the trust and faith in me to let me have input and let me help them. I'm always open to work with any team on whatever they need me to do to just help make the game better. And I never get sick of it. It's always, it's a ton of hard work, but it's a ton of fun. And I'm really glad I get to work with like the best guys in the industry. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
Oh, wow.
So white wood, white hair. So when we're developing games, the first playfields we build that will have all the inserts, flippers, we'll do like prototype versions of ramps and they don't have art, they're just blank, and we call them white woods. We usually have 3 major revisions of white woods on a project before we go to like, okay, now it's got art and we move on. And things can change, they can take things off, they can add, change things. But as we're developing them, you have got this blank, the white woods.
So that's like pre-production, it's not even like the prototype.
Correct, yeah. Prototypes eventually have art.
Yeah.
These are like pre-prototypes, and then like I said, there's 3 major revisions of them throughout the design cycle at Stern. Right there.
Of the pinball machines you've worked on, what was your favorite?
That's a good question. The one I'm most proud of, there's 2 things I'm most proud of. It's hard, it's like asking who your favorite kid is. But James Bond was my largest rule design role. Like I was the lead rule designer on that. I designed pretty much all of those rules. And the whole game was a collaboration between me and Lonnie for the software. Although I'm not a programmer, I work with them all. So I work out with Lonnie like what I want the rules to be, and he has to go and program it. I'm very proud of that because when that game shipped, it was like bare bones and people weren't really into it. And rightfully so, because there wasn't really hardly any game to it. But now people, like every show come to tell me like, I love that game. A lot of people tell me that's their favorite game. That's the highest praise. Batman's another one I always answer that question because it was the first thing I worked on with Stern. I got to work on it with Lyman, who sadly has since passed away. He was a great friend to me for 25 years, and I owe him my career at Stern because he lobbied for me. Also, that channel changing thing, we got awarded a patent for it, and both his and my name is on the patent, and that's like, I'll cherish that for the rest of my life. Because that's something we designed together, that feature, and that now I've got like forever in the world that patent exists that I share with him. Yes?
So the opposite of that, what's your least favorite game involved?
Wow. Any company? All right, so I glossed over some stuff. I'll back up and answer that question. There was a bunch of stuff at Midway Games, not only did we were like the game testers, Neil Nicastro and Ken Fidesno, that was the president and vice president, they would bring Eddie and me into like when people were showing games, like they called them the dog and pony shows. They would bring us and make us play the game, and Neil would ask us in front of the development teams, like, what do you think of this game? And when the first couple times I tried to dance around not liking something, trying not to hurt the feelings or insult the developers, Neil would just he just put me in the spot. He goes, he'd start yelling at me to tell him. And I'm like, and I wouldn't say like, look, it sucks. But I'm like, this isn't fun. And more than once, in front of everybody, I was like, I'm telling, like, there's one particular game that got canceled because of me, because I told him, I got into an argument with the lead developer, and I kept saying, this isn't fun, and he goes, oh no, you're doing it wrong, you could just do this. And he had an excuse for everything that was not fun about the game. And at some point, I had enough of this, and I said, look, you could butt me for the rest of the day, and you'll never compel a second 50 cents out of my pocket. And Neil said, that's all I needed to hear, and he walked away and canceled the game the next day. And the game ended up coming out for the home, but the coin-op version of it got canned. That was a difficult spot to be in because you have to. It's not easy to tell people like, I don't like this, it's not fun, and you have to explain to them why. Most people are pretty good about taking that and will listen. And those are like the better game designers. You have to have a thick skin. And same with me, like I'll tell people, just shoot straight at me, you're never gonna hurt my feelings. I just want the game to be good. There was a project at Midway that Eddie and I got fired on off of because we didn't like the game, and when we told him why we didn't like it, we were trying to help him. He's like, you just don't like it because, and he gave a bunch of reasons. And he hired his own game testers that would tell him what he wanted to hear. They're like, yeah, your game was great. The game went on test, it didn't earn any money. It went on to be a flop on the home side too. And I mean, I was proven right, but I'm not proud of that. It was unfortunate. We really wanted to help them make that game better. Because we wanted every game to be successful because we like getting paychecks. So
You can't say the title though? You're skirting around it.
yeah, it was workouts. I'm not disparaging the team. The game looked fantastic, but the gameplay just wasn't there, and they weren't willing to hear that. And they thought that we didn't like it because they're like, well, you're Ed's boys, and he told you not to like our game. I'm like, that's not true. Like, if it was fun, we would tell you. We want to help you make it fun. He goes, no, you're fired from this game. Like, we'll go get our own testers. And the game just, the game suffered for it. I'm still friendly with many of the people that work on the team. One of which, gave me a job many years later when I needed it. So it's all water under the bridge. So that was probably the least favorite game I worked on there. As great as Cruising was, I was so sick of looking at and hearing the music. I used to unplug the speakers, so that one was particularly punishing. And MK4, for as fun as MK3 was working on, one of my career highlights, MK4 was the polar opposite. Like, we got yelled at every day. The game didn't really turn out that good. Everybody was under a lot of pressure. That one was not fun at all. Any more questions? That's a good question, by the way. Let him have a prize too. You can have a choice of some pint glasses or a Gary. And that's my last Gary, by the way. Okay. Yes.
You have a lot of hacks over your career. Do you have like a special way you pick up new skills? Because I feel like you've done a lot and like learned a lot.
Yeah, so this whole career, I didn't plan any of it. Like I said, if I didn't meet Bill, if he was wearing any other shirt or didn't go to that concert, you guys wouldn't be staring at me on the stage right now. Like, I don't know what I would have done. I had no plan. I've always been one at a job to try to learn more things, to make myself more useful and grow. Because I didn't want to do the same thing forever, So when I was working as a game tester at Midway, I would offer like, hey, I'll go give you those ROMs. I'll go update this game at this arcade. I'll go fix that game at the arcade. This one's by my house, I was always putting myself out there to try to help out in places that I didn't really belong so much. But I wanted to learn more and become more valuable because it was just job security to me. It was on-the-job training to give me more skills. And I was very grateful that I was given opportunities to dip my toes in a thing, and people encouraged me and tried to teach me things. Like, I'll never learn to be a programmer, but I worked with such great, talented programmers. They had faith in me to we'll give you this tool to make these light shows for those music pins. Again, they came to me with that. They're like, you're a content photographer, you know what this stuff should look like. And they took a chance on me. So I've been very fortunate that people gave me opportunities and took chances on me. But a lot of it was me putting myself out there saying, I want to learn, I want to help. What can I do to help you? Yes?
MK3 to Ultimate MK3. I've heard various things about that process over the years. What happened? Was that a reskin or a refactor of the game?
So that's a very good question. Give them a banner. I've never been asked that before. The plan was always to do 2 games, Mortal Kombat 3 and then Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. It was to give the game longer legs with operators because the home game was going to come out sooner than normal, but they wanted to really capitalize off the franchise while it was still hot, and really it was a reward to the Ultimate was a free upgrade to anybody that bought it in Mortal Kombat 3. And we said from the get-go, the distributors were told, in 6 months, you're getting this upgrade that's gonna freshen up the game and make it new again and add characters and whatever. So that was always the plan. So when we finished MK3, we had almost no downtime maybe we took a month off because those guys had to catch up before they brought Eddie and I back in, and then the two of us and Ed Boon, again, were back to working on Ultimate MK3 for like many months until that came out. And then they shipped the marquees, the artwork, the ROM sets to everybody that bought one. So that was always the plan. And then we wanted to do something special for the PlayStation. This is the very first PlayStation. And that's how MK Trilogy came about. And again, I wish that had become, that was its own project, but it started from Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. And then we took stuff from MK2, the characters that weren't in 3, and they put it all in there, and they made with the existing animations combos and stuff.
I remember seeing that game like one time, and then I've been trying to find it ever since. I didn't realize it was only on PlayStation.
It was only on PlayStation, yeah.
Was there a PC port of it at some point?
I don't believe there was. There might be now.
It was a PC port.
Okay, there was?
Yeah, I was a kid. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, see, I didn't even know that. Like, Eddie and I had to approve all that stuff for the PlayStation 1, and we flew to Salt Lake City to work with those developers like once as well, and they would send me builds to play, and I'd be like, okay, yes, no, or whatever, you know. Yeah, any more questions? We're running out of time.
Yeah, you seem to have done quite a bit and often interact with programmers.
Uh-huh.
I'm just curious, have you considered learning programming with yourself?
I was told by Ed Boon back, he's like, you have a weird understanding of how these things work at a high level. He goes, you might have missed your calling. I suck at math, so like, I don't know if I'll be a good programmer. And at this point, I don't have the time to learn it. I would love to, but I'm the kind of guy that I can't learn it in a book so much. When you show me stuff enough times, I pick it up, and then when I start doing it, then it sticks. I wouldn't be against it, but I think I have a big learning curve ahead of me, you know?
So there's almost no math in programming.
Well, that's good. That's in my thing.
You can do it, Mike.
And books are very passive when it comes to learning.
Yeah, I wouldn't be against it, but again, like when I'm done with my workday, like to try to keep a work-life balance, I try not to focus on work stuff, and that would be work. And I do concept photography on the side, like I'm in a relationship. I've got I travel a ton, so it's hard, but I would not be against it. Like, and it's been brought to me before. Give him a prize too.
Yeah.
I'm in one of those.
Venom?
Yeah, what do you like better, Venom or Stranger Things? Give him the Venom. That's my last one too. Any more questions?
This will be the
One more?
last question.
Last question.
Did you do any voice acting in any of those games you worked on?
Never. I would have loved to. I don't know that I've got a good voice for that, but no, thank you. Nobody's ever asked, but I would totally do it if they asked. All right, if anybody else has any questions, I'll be in the Stern and Marco booth, or grab me in the hall after I pack up the last little stuff. I'm here all weekend, and I'm happy to answer anything except what's the next Stern game. All right, thank you all so much for coming.